We also have joining us online is Adrian Ladrose. He's the Vice President of Technology at Gyro Data, and he has a lot of history with running their microguide tool to diagnose wellbore problems that are related to tortuosity and bending stresses on components after the fact. And also Ross Loudon is with us with Schlumberger. He's the survey domain manager for all of survey, and both of them serve on the SPE wellbore quality ISWA panel. So we wanted to connect with the SPE via these gentlemen, and also because all of us are involved in the communication business in one form or another, we want to take up that question of how do we improve the communication to the industry around this whole topic. So just going to look online and see if we have actual questions. So share them there.
Go to the chat. There are several people who popped up in the chat.
Maybe I can start just to continue with Bill was saying about the communication. With one operator, we didn't get to communicate much more with the fracking, but certainly with the production. And we got together at the end the drilling and the production teams looking at the same wells, because well, certainly for the drilling, they finish their job and they move to drill the next well, and then production, they get stuck with that well and they have to make it produce, and depending on the artificial lift that they're going to use, well, tortuosity is very important. So after we start showing how the well looked like, they internally met, and it became a standard procedure to plan the wells and to look at the execution, having the production and the drilling department working together. So I'm not sure how the artificial lift look on that chart pipe that you have, Bill. I thought that was very, at least informative for me about the cost and the time of the different phases. But I thought maybe, well, production or artificial lift should be added to that, because ultimately that also affect the production and the revenue from that well.
Yeah, when at the ERTEC conference, and you know, I kind of set it up, those pie charts, I talked specifically in well construction, and the production people would say, well, you know, just because you give us a perfect well doesn't mean it's going to produce. There's a lot of expertise that goes into the actual production management of it. And so I'm submitting to you that I'm cutting it off at actual construction, because like again at ERTEC, they go into all of the different issues associated with production. And ERTEC concentrates mostly on hydraulic fracture design and production. So we'll you know, that's a good dialogue. You know, I mean, how do we look at the whole overall thing? I'm submitting we cut it off with just well construction, which is through fracturing, just for sanity's sake for right now.
Okay, and Ross, I'm going to ask you to give a brief introduction and just some opening remarks and help us understand what's going on the SPE side of this as well.
Yeah, sure. I'm Ross Loudon. I'm currently the chairman of the ISWA committee, and Adrian is the program chair, and will be chairman in about a year and a half, well, about a year's time actually now. But yeah, one of the things that we're seeing, so the ISWA committee concentrates and has concentrated for a long time, if you like, on the nitty-gritty of surveying, building error models, building systems for understanding anti-collision, and de-risking, from a placement point of view, de-risking wells. And one of the things that we really need to start focusing on now, and is going to be a focus for the next while anyway, is education. And I was very, these presentations are fantastic, and I've seen a lot really good and interesting work being done. And I'd love to be working with IADD and others and getting that message about, you know, why surveying matters. And, you know, one of the reasons that Tortuosity is gets spoken about in hushed terms is because you, without surveying it properly, you don't know it's there, and you make assumptions, and you often make the wrong assumption. And I think everybody's quite right in saying that this is a problem that I think artificial lift and production are perhaps just not aware of, and really need to get to grips with and understand far better. Because you know, Adrian's experience is the same as the experience I've had in Somerset, that you can speak to one set of people and convince one set of people, but actually getting a message beyond, you know, when I speak to drilling people, they're interested perhaps in tortuosity and improving, you know, taking their MSc and improving their MSc data, translating that downhole into better ROP. But that's a completely different conversation that you have to have with our friends in production and artificial lift.
Yeah, Ross, I hear you on that a fair bit, and that's why I'm pushing that we get a better technical organization in there, and I'm hanging Frac Focus out there as a group that is organizing the data that is specifically important to them, so that they can actually make their case. You know, they're basically saying, don't you dare have a spill of more than a gallon or so, or we're going to be able to see you. And you know what? I believe them. I believe them because they're organized. So, you know, and you know, you and the ISWA have been working on improvements in survey accuracy, and you know, it's a long-term struggle, if you will, and a long-term road to improvement. I mean, look at where we are with MSA and other sorts of things in actual positioning. You know, I think what Magvar and Superior are doing is quite admirable. You know, we need to do the same sort of thing across a broader section of directional drilling mechanics and everything. And you know, so that we can talk to those different audiences and get to a more unified message, you know, of standards of some nature. So again, I'm proposing that we have that sort of dialogue.
Yeah, and I very open. Certainly, I think ICSWA and the committee will be very open to working with others on broadening our reach, if you like, and getting this message out there. I think you're entirely right. Communication it's not only the key; it's the only way we're going to start moving forward. We can't really. We're optimizing in silos has worked for a while, but we need to optimize the whole.
We had a question here that Blaine just showed me on the tortuosity to production on that one field, that you know, while an acceptable correlation coefficient of 0.4 looks pretty good on that one, no one else has come to that conclusion, which is true. There was a very good study on tortuosity done by Teresa Baumgarten and the people up at UT Austin. She's with Shell now. And they came to the conclusion that there wasn't a relationship between tortuosity and production. And they also detailed all of the different calculations of tortuosity, and they proposed the UT Tortuosity Index, which is being tested, you know, with 4 different flavors right now, in attempt to, from an academic point of view, come up with a useful metric in tortuosity that may eventually lead to some indication of profitability of production. The thing I wanted to point out was we did a statistical study across multiple fields of similar wells, and I hate to say I faulted them for it, but I think their sampling was too broad to get a decent correlation coefficient. So I'm proposing that we look at the larger leases where we have 15 or 20 or 30 wells and get some feel for the relationship between tortuosity in a specific uniform geological environment, which most of the other studies don't cover. And that's kind of my answer to that one question that we got.
Yeah, I've been poring over that paper all week just to make sure that I had my information straight. And Bill, with all due respect, I just want to make sure we're very clear on what they said. They said they did not conclude that there was no relationship. What they concluded was that they couldn't make a conclusion. It was not clear. There were some things that looked like there might be some kind of correlation, but they could not say it was cause, okay? It was not definitive. And because there are so many different things that were, so many different variables at play within all of those different completions and the way the fracking had been done, they tried to normalize a lot of that stuff. But I just want to be clear, they didn't say, no, there is no correlation. What they said was, we could not find enough correlation to say it does affect production. Okay, so the jury is still out, basically. But I like what I saw from you, Bill, because that would suggest that, yes, there is some degree of correlation between a lower tortuosity well and a better producing well. So,
but I have a comment here for Bill and a question. I mean, I think you were involved in the two studies with Teresa and now what team presented. How you conciliate the two things? The Tortuosity Index is based on the 100-foot or 90-foot data, and then we just seen, well, similar to what we saw with the high density data, or looking at what happened between that there may be a significant hidden problem. It's just if you go to one of those databases and get the data every 100 feet and try to estimate the different tortuosity indexes, you will miss what's going on in between, and that can be a very significant factor.
yeah, absolutely, Adrian. I agree. I agree completely, and you know, you can draw whatever conclusions you want off of your input data, but if your input data is flawed, you're not going to draw correct conclusions. And if we're doing it on a 9-foot basis, we saw today, that is not an accurate representation of the true wellbore. So we're kind of you know, missing the point, to be honest. So
yeah, an old philosopher in analytics said to me, you know, I'd like to be right, but if I can't be right, I want to be at least consistently wrong. And you know, I'm relying on the strength that in our current industry we have 90-foot surveys quite consistently. And you know, what can we do with that consistency?
I think you cannot say you are consistently wrong or right. One well you may be spot on, and the other one you may be the 100 feet off laterally, or 80 feet was shown today vertically.
Oh, you're totally right, because when we look at hi-fi nav calculations, and you don't have to have a specific hi-fi nav. You can make the you can balance out the 90-foot surveys with Slidesheet Data. Again, that's proprietary, but you know, there's probably several people that have done that. I've done that. It takes about 6 hours to do a well, and it's tedious and a real pain. But you can look at wells, and yeah, some of them are spot on. Again, you know, that it's where those slides are in relation to the survey point, and then how systematic or random it is. So there's no way to predict it without looking at it. Consistently wrong with the 90-foot surveys. You know, I'm trying to look at things that I can actually do with 90-foot surveys, and you know, and with large tortuosity, knowing full well that violating this minimum curvature, which requires the constant curvature, it is a significant limitation. And you know, from the work that I'm doing, that's really the question that we need to answer. Now, you know, from a drilling mechanics point of view, you know, we shouldn't be using motors. We should be doing all this with rotary steerable systems. But we should also have 30-foot surveys. You know, I'm not going to get either one of those. Motors are here to stay. you know, let's manage that problem, but let's acknowledge that the problem that we have with it. And you know, until we do, you know, we're missing a huge area that's going to cause us and the frac people problems. So let's get it out on the table.
Yeah, if I can just add to that as well, I think, you know, we don't run in US land, there's not a lot of LWD run, but there are some runs with deep resistivity type tools. And if you take a survey every 90 feet and you assume that that's gospel and correct, then a lot of these logs end up looking a bit odd, and you can end up with as it's been quoted to me, geological impossibilities happening. And part of that is because there is an urge once you have these, once you have something like a deep resistivity tool that's showing you bed boundaries, that you start steering with those bed boundaries. And the dog legs you can put in while you're steering with these boundaries is actually quite high. Now the overall change in TVD might be quite small because you're going up and down, following these bed boundaries. But the impact on the image and then taking that image and putting it back into your reservoir model is really quite considerable. And I think there's another aspect that also has to be thought about as well. What is the point in spending a lot of money on LWD images and then not dotting the I's and crossing the T's to make sure that those images are actually showing the right space the right place in 3D space?
Ross, I can tell you've been talking to Ed again.
No. But no, I mean, I think there's that, you know, this whole thing is all tied together. At the end of the day, it all ties back to production, and then people scratching their heads about why two wells that are nominally parallel to each other at the same TVD are producing at different rates. And these are some of the reasons that, you know, I think these are some of the reasons that the oil companies are in, some companies are in very big trouble, because that lack of understanding of reservoir models, because we keep poking holes in the ground and not surveying them properly, is adding up to real confusion about where to drill.
Any other questions for our panelists? Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just thinking, perhaps that's something of a sweeping statement, but it's something I've seen in my experience of some of the wells I've looked at in US land.
So how do we make sure that we're not here a year from now and going through this same discussion in terms of a failure to communicate to those who need to know this information? Any brainstorming ideas on how to get this message across better?
Does anybody? I mean, you know, I've said my ideas basically. Quite frankly, if we are here a year from now,
yeah,
we will have gotten the message across. If you know.
Yeah,
it's a brutal test.
We're just in this brutal. It's just
we are
cyclical industry, right? Is that we have people graying out. We have knowledgeable people, experienced people graying out. If they get lucky enough to gray out, if not, they go find something else because of the cyclical nature. And we don't do a good job of knowledge share. We a lot of data, we don't consume just a portion of it. And it's just like the stabilizer. You know, 22 years ago, we were drilling everything with stabilizers. That's how I learned how to directional drill. Every 5 years, I'm in a conversation in an engineer's office or a conference room, and we're talking about utilizing stabilizers again. Like, how many times do we have to have the conversation? It's going to happen again because we have new people entering the industry. A lot of us have seen a lot. You know, I mean, with 2 remote operating centers and 130 rigs globally, I saw anytime, any given day was 85 VHAs hitting the rig 4. 85 VHAs a day. And we're monitoring bit wear, differential pressure, MSE, stick slip, all these indications, wear, all these things that are happening, turning 650 motors a month. That's knowledge and experience that an engineer won't ever see in his lifetime. Even if he's done 20 years, he's not going to see that much. How can we get, as an operator, not as like an engineer at a directional drilling company or something like that, but you know, the answer, it's a good question. Like, we're going to be there, we're going to be having this conversation over and over and over. It's going to be, like Bill said, he wants 30-foot surveys. I want 1-foot surveys. Like, I mean, why are we not working on the algorithms which we are, to perfect azimuthal adjustments on continuous azimuth and continuous ink until we get it perfected? And then all of a sudden you have a continuous wellbore of measurements. I mean, these are things that we need to push. And the short answer is that I'm selling a tool to a guy that the impact of that tool is not going to be felt by unless it improves his ROP, because his focus and his goal is ROP. His focus is not the production of the well, because he's come and gone and he's drilled 3 wells before he even knows, and then it never gets correlated. So there's a distinct business case to work on communication in this industry big time, and we're not capitalizing on it. I've been in too many meetings where geology is not present, production is not present, completions is not present. And the decisions that we're making to construct a wellbore in a quality fashion, those are the people that need to be in that meeting at the time the decisions are made, and they're not. And this happens every day. Companies that you believe, operators that you believe are completely got it together, are completely dysfunctional. I can absolutely attest to it.
Not that you name names.
I'm not naming names because I'm trying to sell to them. Right? But the fact of the matter is that it would shock you to know how dysfunctional. And these are things that you go shaking your head, but that, to answer the question, we're going to be back in this conversation because of the turnover in the industry. We're going to constantly be talking about it. But you know, where we would fail is if we're not constantly talking about it.
Yeah.
So eventually something's got to, we can't sweep it under the rug.
If they hear enough times from enough different people, maybe they'll start to buy in that this is something they need to pay attention to.
Yeah, and attrition rates start to kind of, I think the industry's collectively coming back together. I can remember directional drilling when I got in was 8% of the market share. Everything was vertical drilling. And now we're opposite of that, right? But I think that there's a contraction happening within the industry. We're getting smaller. It's going to be a smaller community of people talking. I think now is the best time to be having these conversations, because something will probably stick now rather than a great expansion area in the, you know, error in the industry.
Time to do it.
Yeah,
Right,
exactly.
right.
Running around. Crazy. Okay. All right. Well, go ahead.
Matt Rhubarb, Marathon. I really agree with what Chris is saying. There's a lot of dysfunctionality among different departments, things to keep performance indicators and annual bonuses. So that's why our drilling department doesn't talk downstream, vice versa. But when I'm thinking about looking at the presentations that we've got some indices coming up that, okay, one well's better than the other on the index. Maybe IED adopts one and says that's our index as well. And then maybe come up with a bragging board on our website to say, hey, best well of the year goes to brand X, right? So that would encourage people to actually push this. And then when I'm looking at deploying tools from one directional company over another, looking at mean time between failures, but, you know, Blaine, you said you had a tool in the hole for 600 hours, which is dumbfounding me still. That's a whole month. That major metrics that year, I bet. You couple that index with your failures, you're going to see less failures on less tortuous wells. Before you know it, it becomes more of our vocabulary of, hey, what kind of well do you do? So we have to encourage ourselves across the whole spectrum. And I've got the operator point of view, but it's always refreshing coming to these meetings and hearing the service side because it's a different flavor.
Yeah, but it really shouldn't be, should it? I mean, it would be nice if it was a little more intuitive and cohesive.
We've got to integrate further. Yeah, sure.
Anyone else? We're way beyond our agenda. We got some feedback after the last one that it was, when we went to 2 o'clock, it was too long. And so I created an agenda that shrunk everything back down to 1 o'clock. And then none of us held to our allotted times, and here we are at 2 o'clock.
So it's actually 2:15. It's 2:15. You went longer.
I went longer, and I had a half-hour pad in my agenda. Half hour. We were going to stop at 12:30. So anyway, this has been amazing. We're going to get these presentations. Once we clear that with each one of the presenters, we'll be posting these on the ID website, and I think we'll probably be sending out some of these in some LinkedIn blasts on a periodic basis, just to try to continue to stoke the flames of this topic. I think this is something that the industry really needs to start doing on a consistent basis and paying attention to, especially now.
Mention the mining network as well.
Okay, yeah, we some of you may know, but IDD has now launched our own Mighty network. It is basically your own private Facebook, if you will. So it's a great place.
LinkedIn. It's Facebook and LinkedIn.
Yeah, it's kind of Facebook and LinkedIn put together. There are topics where you can go and post questions or have discussions with people. We're going to have events posted there as well as on the IDD website. And it's just a good place to have a ongoing dialogue over things where you can actually not just look at the stuff on a website, but actually make comments and post things to get some conversation going as well. And so, and we've just seen explosive growth with that since we launched it. So that's really something that people are really enjoying. And with that, I just want to thank every one of our presenters. Again, we had just a stellar lineup today, and even though we did go over, I believe it was well worth it. I hope you all found that it was worth your time today. And thank you again for your participation. And with that, we'll say, we'll see you next month.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.